It is good to have your company on this Saturday morning, the last day prior to daylight saving, because daylight saving starts in most states tomorrow. The only states that aren't going with daylight saving are us, Western Australia and the Northern Territory, which is a territory, not a state, but nonetheless. So three of us not going on to daylight saving. Now, I don't want to get into an argument about whether we should or we shouldn't have daylight saving. It's a tired old argument. The arguments are always the same every year, so I don't want to talk about that specifically. But I do want to talk about daylight saving, the history of it, and the concept of it. And I'm going to talk to Max, who's going to talk to us. Max Bougea is something of an expert, if you like, on daylight saving. He's on the line. G'day, Max.
Good morning, Ian.
Max, daylight saving is nothing new, is it?
No, as a matter of fact, daylight saving was attributed to a person called George Hudson, an English-born New Zealander.
An English-born New Zealander?
Yeah, he was the first one credited for daylight savings back in 1895, where he proposed a 2-hour shift in daylight.
2-hour shift in daylight?
That's correct.
Where was he living when he suggested this?
In New Zealand.
He was living in New Zealand, was he?
Yes, he was.
Was it taken up?
Yes, it was, but it took a few years later.
Yeah. I know that most people attribute daylight saving as beginnings to the First World War.
Well, that's when the first recorded history of daylight savings was in World War I, back in 1916. Australia brought it in using their wartime powers to bring in daylight savings. And the reason was, it was because they wanted to save coal.
Mm.
And also, the beauty about it is, those days, daylight savers, the months were January to March, and every state and territory was included in that one.
And that was because the federal government, as you say, exerted its powers under wartime.
That's correct.
So the federal government controlled daylight saving back in the First World War. They don't control it now. No, they don't. Do you think they should?
Yes, I do. I personally feel they should, because it's a disruption between businesses, between all states. It's, I've got family in other states, and I've got to say, oh, wait a minute, my son in New South Wales, it's too late to ring now because it's 10 o'clock instead of being 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then, Western Australia, I've got a family member there ringing back, and he rings me at the wrong time.
Yeah, I know. It really is. Look, I agree with you. I do think the federal government should be the ones controlling whether or not we do have daylight saving, but that's another argument for another time. But let's talk about daylight saving now. And Tasmania has had a major influence on daylight saving in Australia, hasn't it? That's
right. Matter of fact, Tasmania is the state that virtually brought daylight savings to Australia. Surprisingly, after a long time after World War II, Tasmania turned around and implemented daylight savings to save power and water, because they were suffering a severe drought. And that was back in the summer of 1967. And they thought it was so great that they continued to have daylight savings.
Yeah, just hold it there, because you skipped over the Second World War, and I didn't realise that the Second World War saw its reintroduction.
Yes, it was in 1941 to 1944. They brought in daylight savings again, but this time they extended it from October to March. But the last year of daylight savings during the war, Western Australia, for some unknown reason, dropped out.
So the federal government didn't control it then?
No, they didn't.
So they controlled it for the First World War, but not the Second. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, but then Tasmania introduced it. What year was that?
Tasmania back in, let me remember, 1967.
67.
Yep.
Tasmania brought in daylight saving to save power.
That's correct.
Okay, and how long did they do that?
Oh, well, they've never stopped from that.
Oh, is that right? Never stopped since 1967?
That's correct.
Wow, how about that? When did the rest of the country sort of wake up to this idea of Tasmania's?
Well, the federal government thought it was such a great idea, so they decided to bring it into the rest of Australia. It was about 4 years later, in 1971, where every state, including Queensland, would you believe, brought in daylight savings that summer.
In 1971?
1971, yes. So it took a long time before we decided, or parts of Australia decided, to have daylight savings.
So let me get this clear, and I don't want to harp on this, but the federal government introduced it in the First World War.
Yes.
But not the Second World War, although some states did it in the Second World War.
That's correct.
Western Australia dropped out. Tasmania decided to go it alone in 1967.
That's correct.
And then in 1971, was it a federal government introduction, or did each state look after it themselves?
Well, the the federal government proposed it to all the states, and only some of the states took it up.
I see. So the federal government said, why don't you do this? It's up to you. And then they said, no, bugger you, we'll do our own thing.
That's correct.
Okay, 1971. And all states did it in 71. How long did Queensland do it in 71?
They only did it for the 1 year.
For the 1 year?
Yeah.
Do we know why they opted out?
Well, the main reasons why we don't have it now. You know, the cows can't be milked at the right time and whatever.
All of those. And we did have it again as a trial, though, a little later on, didn't we?
Yes, back in 1982, we decided to rejoin the Daylight Savings Group, but that again only lasted for 3 years. Okay.
And we haven't had it since?
No. The main problem is with Daylight Savings is the ending time every summer.
Yes.
In the beginning, some of the states ended the Daylight Savings in the first week of March, other states did it the following week, and the rest of the states did it at the end of the month. But it wasn't until 2009 that all states agreed to have the Daylight Savings start and ending time together.
Mm-hmm. So we now have, 5 time zones, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, well, there you go. Look, but it's not just Australia, of course. Parts of the world have had daylight saving for as long, if not longer, than we have.
Yes, quite a few countries have daylight savings. It's surprising that there's very few countries that don't have it. Like Russia, the Asian continent don't have it. Most of Africa don't have it. Virtually, that's about it.
Yeah, the UK has it.
Oh yes, all the European countries do.
And it's a federal government decision, is it not?
Well, I don't know about the other countries, but I do know which countries do have it and which countries don't.
Yeah, well, I think the federal government of the UK decrees that it will be in. The United States, there are a couple of states that don't have it.
I think there's only one state that don't have it, and I think that is California.
I think Iowa is another one that doesn't have it.
All right, yep.
So obviously it's up to each state's discretion whether they do or not. But that's an interesting thing, Max, and I do thank you for that. And you've got a very good website about that, haven't you?
Yes, that was created by my wife and I because we wanted to promote Australia and Australians themselves. A lot of people, especially my overseas friends, kind of keep saying to us, "Hey, you're talking a different language." So what we did is we created alldownunder.com, and it's virtually a know-all for all other people and to promote Australia.
Alldownunder.com.
That's correct.
Good. How long have you had that?
We've had that for, I think, over 10 years. My wife created it. I'm the person that does the technical work, and she does all the web designing. It's all her content. I just do the research and pass it on to her.
Good stuff. Well, good on you, Max, for telling us all about that. I appreciate it, mate.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Max Bujaya, who has that alldownunder.com.